Hello and welcome. My name is Dan Meyer. I'm editor-in-chief of RCR Wireless News. Thanks for joining us today. Joining us today is Prayson Pate, who's the CTO over at Overture. Prayson, thanks for joining us today. Appreciate it.
Dan, thanks for having us on. I appreciate very much the time to have a talk with you and talk about some of the things we've been doing at Overture.
That sounds great. Well, maybe I'll start off with, for those who don't know what you guys do or how you guys participate in the NFV space, maybe a quick overview of the company.
So yeah, that's a great idea. So Overture's been around since 2000, and up until recently, we were focused on carrier Ethernet equipment, and as such made a good penetration into the market, and we're fortunate to be working with most of the Tier 1 and Tier 2 operators in North America as well as some around the world. But starting about 2 years ago, we reinvented ourselves to move from being a box company to one focused on service creation, activation, and assurance at the edge of the network. And that was quite a change for us, and it helped our customers understand where we were going, but also helped us think more about what services our customers are delivering, how the end users are consuming them, and how that reflects on what we're making as opposed to just be focusing on speeds and feeds. A lot of this change came when Mike Aquino joined the company as CEO, and he has really emphasized to us the importance of understanding what our customers are doing and how we can help support them as they move forward. So it's really about our services and our customers, not technology. But there are important aspects of technology which we can talk about.
Yeah, great. That's well, obviously a big change for you guys coming from kind of the old, like you said, boxes kind of model to the new one too. So obviously a big change inside the company. I'm sure that was exciting to kind of witness how that all kind of came together.
It's been a tremendously exciting opportunity for me personally. Being a founder of the company, I've been here since the beginning, and I'm very proud of the customers that we have. And I've told the team here that in some sense that's really our secret weapon. As we've moved into this new space, there was some skepticism both on the part of the press, the analysts, as well as our customers if we could really do this. But the one thing that our customers knew was that we understood the space and we understood the services that they were delivering. So when we came to them and told them how we were going to leverage these new technologies like virtualization, like network functions virtualization, like SDN or software-defined networking, open ecosystems, open platforms, they understood that those were new technologies, but we understood very well the problems they were trying to solve. So when we moved from PowerPoint to actual solutions being delivered, they matched very much what the customers were needing. And one of the things we've really emphasized is that these new solutions are not going to be deployed in a greenfield. It's critical that we help our customers migrate from today's network. So the solutions we're bringing to bear, let them migrate, let them solve a today problem, but also at the same time lay down the infrastructure for the benefits they'll get tomorrow.
Makes sense. Makes sense. Well, I know you guys have some new products that came to market. Let's touch on those a little bit. What do you guys bring to market recently here?
So last week we made 2 announcements of extensions to our Ensemble Open Service Architecture. The first one is something we're calling Ensemble Service Intelligence, ESI. And virtualization is a tremendously powerful tool. It lets us think about the service we're constructing and hiding some of the underlying details. So when you're building an application running in a virtualized environment, you have to worry about whether your computer is an HP or a Dell or how many processors or cores it has or how much memory. You can hide all that as an abstraction. That's a tremendously powerful tool. But when you take and you apply that technology to carrier networks, you also have lost some information, and that is, what is the correlation or coupling between a service, the virtual infrastructure, and the physical infrastructure? Now that's not terribly important when you're constructing a service, but think about the case of a auto-scale event where you're adding additional resources to a virtualized service. Or think about the case of a VM migration due to a server failure. In both those cases, you might have an autonomous change to the network and things work like they were supposed to, but if you're going back later and trying to understand, did I actually have my policies set correctly for the auto-scale event? And what was the real cause of the failure that occurred? Was it a server dying? Was it a port on a top-of-rack switch? Was it a virtualization layer failing? In order to answer those questions, you have to go back and be able to correlate between the service, the virtual layer, and the physical layer. That's a big piece of what Ensemble Service Intelligence is providing. Another aspect that it helps with is this integration with existing OSS and BSS systems. As I said, with our whole approach to Ensemble is not only bringing these new technologies to bear, but it's how we deploy them in current networks. And a key aspect of any current service provider network is their IT systems, their OSS and BSS systems. Ensemble Service Intelligence gives a handy way to connect these newly virtualized services to the existing IT infrastructure to enable those services to roll out. And a simple example of that is billing. Right now, a lot of these virtualized services could be dynamic and could be serving some new market space like Internet of Things or IoT. How are you going to bill for that? In the past, billing was a very detailed feature that was constructed as a negotiation between the equipment provider, like an Overture, and the service provider. But now we wouldn't even know what to negotiate because we don't know how those are going to be billed. With a tool like ESI, the operator can define how the billing is based on getting information about the resources consumed, or the bandwidth consumed, or the time of use, or whatever makes sense. And the key here is that they can define that themselves very quickly and respond to a changing environment. So that's what ESI is about: coupling together disparate pieces of intelligence, making actionable, or converting that to something that's actionable, like an autoscale event, and then tying into other systems that are going to be necessary for deployment. So we're very excited about it, and we're seeing a lot of positive reception from our carrier customers.
That sounds good. Well, obviously, you kind of touched on the auto-scaling aspect of it. I mean, I've been doing a little bit of a new report on kind of NFV here recently, and that does seem to be one kind of challenge for the NFV market, is the fact that, you know, a lot of this virtualization, or this move towards virtualization, is going to rely on automation. You know, a lot of stuff's going to have to kind of take care of itself, not necessarily, you know, all on its own, but it's going to have to be able to react fairly quickly, which will probably mean, you know, you want to have somebody at a keyboard trying to type stuff in as fast as they can. It'll be kind of all taking care of itself in the background there. That does seem like that's kind of the challenge, really, for at least for operators to gain the most efficiency and cost savings, perhaps, out of the move to virtualization, is being able to have these systems almost work on their own in the background there.
Well, you're absolutely right. So it's not just an autoscale, but if you think about dynamic creation, I mentioned the Internet of Things. One of the things that's attractive about virtualization as a means to provide carrier services or communication services to support IoT is the fact that you can minimize your upfront investment in terms of capital and operation and OpEx spending, because part of the thing right now is they don't really know what kind of services are going to be desired, what people are going to pay for it, so they're concerned about spending too much money ahead of time. With virtualized solutions running on standard infrastructure, they minimize the cost of that, so they can spin up services on demand or in a very short period of time. They can scale those services, and then they can make other changes, migrate, scale down, recover from faults, whatever. So there's two challenges there. One is the virtualized function has to be scalable. We've been doing some work with Metaswitch on the Clearwater IMS, and that is a horizontally scalable application. So that's the first step. But once you have that application, you have to have a way to tie it into the rest of the infrastructure, as well as things like policy. Just because you can scale a virtual function doesn't mean you should. Do you have available resources? If it's for an end user, have they signed up for a service that supports autoscaling? Have they committed to where they're going to pay for it if they do scale up? So there's a lot of additional connections that have to be made, and we're starting to provide some of those connections with applications like our Ensemble Service Intelligence.
It makes sense. And also, you kind of brought up the fact too that, you know, there is this kind of this legacy systems that are out there. These brownfield, I guess, is a word for it. You know, the fact that operators do have, you know, they've spent the past 30 years acquiring a lot of hardware into their networks that they can't just turn off tomorrow. You know, when they move to virtualization, these are platforms and boxes that they're going to try to support for years and years, kind of going forward. So it does seem like the challenge for these virtualized companies or providers and vendors is to be able to support those legacy systems while at the same time kind of moving forward with the new system. So it does seem like there's going to be this kind of transition period of 2, 3, 4, 5 years where you guys are really going to be probably challenged probably more than you will down the line, even, because you have to kind of support what's already there and then what's also coming too.
Well, it's critically important that we do that. You know, Dan, I do a fair amount of speaking in front of panels and conferences and that type of thing, and here's a surefire way to tell who the operators are in the audience. I say we talk about supporting the legacy part of the network. Well, let me tell you, the legacy part of the network is the revenue-generating part of the network. And then all of the operators will start nodding their heads up and down. You can tell who they are. And that's the point. It's not a matter of choice. That's how they're driving revenue. That's the infrastructure that's out there. So any solution has to be able to leverage that existing infrastructure while at the same time laying the groundwork for forward evolution. Given our expertise in the edge of the network, that's the experience, the knowledge, and honestly the customers. I mentioned early on the secret weapon of our customers. Well, that's something that a lot of these new entrants to the market don't have. They don't have the customers. They can't go in and have this discussion about what is your strategy for rolling out virtualization and SDN. Where are you going to spend the money? What are the key applications? We have those discussions with people who are our current customers, so that's a very valuable way to make sure that what we're delivering is what they need.
Gotcha. And again, now when you're talking to these customers, it does seem like in the telecom space at least, NFV and virtualization. 2014 was probably a big year for that, at least announcement-wise. It seems like most of the operators now have at least some sort of plan on what they're going to do when it comes to virtualization. Maybe some a little more advanced than others. But when you're going out there talking to some of these customers, I mean, what are you seeing, or I guess what do you see as kind of maybe some of the bigger challenges that the market's going to have to face when it comes to kind of pushing virtualization into these legacy and established telecom operators' networks?
There are some big challenges, Dan. Probably the very biggest one is performance. It's great to talk about putting functions that were previously in appliances, putting those in software running on open servers. Virtualization works very well for applications. Today's technology is pretty rotten when it comes to things like packet forwarding. So there's some interesting things that are going on with, for example, Intel has spent a lot of money with their data plane development kit, or DPDK, for accelerating it. And we at Overture have been doing quite a bit of work, and some of that will be reflected in our Ensemble Carrier Ethernet, which is our virtualization for Layer 2. But that's probably the biggest aspect that people are struggling with, is performance. And we've shown some pretty interesting performance figures that make a lot of this practical for our customers. The next one is orchestration. You have a lot of people moving in the space that either were taking their existing intellectual property, and that would be companies like a Cisco or a Juniper and Alcatel-Lucent, and moving it into a virtualized environment. Or you have some entrants into the market, people like HP and Brocade, that were not traditionally known for being routing vendors, now have virtualized router solutions. They're attacking that network element, that virtual network function aspect, but then how do you spin that up? How do you connect it to the rest of the network? So that's an area that Overture spent quite a bit of effort in, and now we're seeing some recognition for our Ensemble Service Orchestration. And one of the key things that we tackled there was the uniting of cloud and connect, because services don't start in the cloud, services start at the edge of the network. So what we're able to do is make that connection between the metro Ethernet access part of the network and the virtualized resources, so that you can create an actual virtualized solution. And kind of the last piece is the one we've already talked about, and that's the tying into today's IT systems. So if you can solve this performance problem, if you can solve this orchestration problem, and you can connect to today's IT systems, then you can unblock deployments and make NFV real. And we think this year, you said 2014, there was a lot of work and a lot of announcements. We think 2015 is when NFV becomes real, and we're seeing that our aggressive, especially our aggressive Tier 2, forward-looking Tier 2 operators are looking to roll out services in the first half of 2015.
Interesting. I mean, yeah, obviously the performance part of it. I mean, operators, they have hundreds of millions of customers out there, and their networks are already kind of stretched in a lot of instances. So yeah, I mean, bringing anything on board that could perhaps degrade their performance to any extent at all is probably a no-go or a non-starter for those guys. So it seems like that performance part of it is going to be key for these guys to at least gain some confidence in this move towards virtualization. That's going to be obviously a big challenge for everybody out there.
Yep, absolutely right.
Yeah, interesting. Well, now you mentioned too, I mean, again, there's a lot of new companies, it seems, or maybe companies that are changing what they've done in the past, like you guys, for instance, in this space. So it seems like, for virtualization to really take off, though, that there needs to be a lot of cooperation, perhaps behind the scenes, because again, this is going to be, software, a lot of it open source, hopefully, that will allow operators to kind of deploy this, across their networks fairly easily. Not necessarily a plug and play, but pretty easy installation. Are you finding that the companies involved that are coming on board with this are open to kind of this collaboration, and are you seeing, I guess, a lot of this work where companies who are traditionally very competitive with each other and maybe trying to hide some of their secret sauce are able to kind of maybe work together a bit more on I guess, advancing virtualization in the network?
We are absolutely seeing that, and we're seeing it not only among the suppliers, but the most astounding thing is we're seeing it with the operators. In the past, operators only wanted to look at products that were completely release tested and preferably have been deployed in 10 other networks. They were trying to minimize their risk and the effort that they put into it. Now we're seeing that operators recognize that they want these open solutions. They want mix and match parts. That means they have to engage with ecosystems of partners, and they have to engage before products, and especially software, is completely released. So we're seeing now operators being much more aggressive in terms of looking at products early on, participating with the suppliers in terms of developing it. And I mentioned a couple of times some of the openness that we've incorporated into our Ensemble open surface architecture. Part of that is to enable our customers to do their own application development or tie these systems into their own systems, doing their own work. So they may engage with us to help with that, but they are now enabled to do it on their own. So they recognize that they have to engage, and they're doing it. Is another thing that's astounding is the degree which we're seeing participation from the IT and operations groups in early discussions in some of these technology. Where in the past you would only be working with the engineering or CTO groups. Now all of the groups are involved, and this is showing that they recognize that they have to change how they work from the old pipeline waterfall method to more modern methods like Agile and DevOps. So we're seeing openness with the operators. We're seeing openness with the suppliers. We at Overture have announced our Harmony program, and we've announced a dozen or so participants in that. One interesting note is we're not supplying any of the virtual network functions to go on our ecosystem except for our Layer 2 VNF. All of the other ones, routing, firewall, SBC, IMS, deep packet inspection, all of those are coming from our partners, and that's a very strong proof point of how important openness is for us. But this is really just us reflecting back what we're hearing from the customers, our customers, about the need for open, interoperable solutions. So the operators are saying that's what they want, their behaviors are reflecting that, and the suppliers are hearing it.
Interesting. Yeah, and obviously you kind of bring the fact that there are these ecosystems kind of forming out there, whether they're, some of them are kind of maybe vendor-generated ecosystems like what you guys are providing with the Harmony platform, but also there's other ones, open source ones out there, OpenNFV, Open Daylight, various ones that are kind of come on board over the past 12 to 18 months. How important are those types of ecosystems in advancing NFV and virtualization? And is there any sort of chance, I guess, because I mean, it seems like there are so many of these popping up, that perhaps that the whole pie is being sliced so thin that it could maybe lead to, maybe down the road, maybe some issues in trying integrating everything back together. I guess, how are these things working together, and is there any concern about the fact that at the end of the day that there could be maybe some issues down the road, when it comes to making it all again come back as a whole pie as opposed to a bunch of slices of pie?
Well, I mean, that is a valid concern. And first, let me say that I would like to recognize the work of the ETSI, NFV, ISG in terms of the work they've done in trying to lay out some not requirements, but some specifications, and most importantly, some terminology. Mm-hmm. Before the ETSI, NFV, ISG got going, there was not a clear consensus on what we meant by a VNF or by MANO or by orchestration or some of those other terms. So just having come up with the reference diagram has been invaluable. But now at the next step, I think is as important or more important perhaps than the standards groups are the real-world experience that we're going to start to collect by taking some of this from the lab into the network. If you think about the evolution of what went on in the cloud, a lot of it was driven by the work, the development of getting cloud as the different flavors of cloud, infrastructure as a service, platform as a service, software as a service, getting those working and then stepping back and saying, okay, let's codify some of this into something like OpenStack. Mm-hmm. And I think that's going to be the mode going forward where a lot of the best input is going to come is real-world experience that then gets captured into standards or preferably open source software implementations. That's where you really know that you've got agreement when people are using a common set of code that is being maintained and evolved by a group in the community and reflecting the real-world learnings of deployments.
Interesting. Yeah, and like you said too, I mean, it's been amazing how just kind of watching this space evolve over the past 12 to 18 months. I mean, it's a lot of work has already been done. It definitely seems like a lot of work still needs to be done, but it's happening, it seems, at such a rapid pace that, like you said, I mean, 2015 could indeed be a pretty big year for NFV, considering it's still relatively new, at least in the telecom space technology. It's just impressive to see how quickly it's all been kind of running together here. So it's been exciting to watch.
It is, but I think let me warn you that you'll start to see as we roll some of this out to the network, you'll see some reports of there's issues and there's trouble and there's heartbreak and that's all absolutely true and that's what happens anytime you take a new technology out into the network. But then shortly after that, when the pioneers start to resolve those issues and see the real-world benefits coming from that, we'll resume the upward trajectory. So prepare yourself for some warnings of disaster with NFV, but then realize that people are working through those.